Well, hello, creatives, community, and kind folks. Welcome to RPG with DBJ. I am your host, DBJ. All of you that take part in this show live, 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube and Twitch, um, are co-hosts of the show. And today is Future Friday. And um, long story short, we're going to have a love affair with the world of the Expanse. It is, although this is a tabletop role playing game community here on YouTube as we talk about these things. This this game is much more than that, and we're going to talk about the story element and why it's so brilliant. Um, the role playing game is made from the Age system. I have never played the Age system. I think I understand it, and but I haven't played it or seen it in action. Although I do know it is a 3d6 system, is two die sixes plus an additional die six for stuns, points, things of that nature. But the Age system um, is the game system that is used, and it is, yes, Kitty, I have a co-host, which is my cat, who's trying to be on camera, and is produced by Green Ronin. Uh, so the brilliance of the Expanse, while not quite like post-human or transhuman, what I love about this system is that about the setting. I apologize. What I love about the setting is that it takes place within our own solar system. I'm a big when he's like, "Why am I here? I never watched The Expanse." Oh, you'll love it. Oh, you will. No, but in all seriousness, it is a hard sci-fi setting, and the brilliance of it, as I explain its origins, will come about, and you'll like kind of scratch your head and go, "Oh, okay." So I'm a hard sci-fi enthusiast. I listen to podcasts about physics and astrophysics. Neil deGrasse Tyson. Isaac Arthur, and plenty of others across the interwebs that talk about science fiction. Um, that I have T-shirts about the probes that were sent to and sent to Mars, and the new telescope that's out there in space. Basically looking at light from the beginnings of our universe and such. And the best part about the Expanse is that it's because it takes place in our own solar system. A lot of scientists and hard sci-fi people feel that we, more likely than not, we won't leave our own solar system until we've colonized and dominated huge sections of where we already live before we go past the Oort cloud and the Kuiper belt. So we will have people living, in space habitats and on the moon, and we'll have scientific outposts on Mercury, and maybe even a ton of people living in aerostatic floating habitats in the clouds of Venus. Plus, we'll have to refuel ships, so we'll have moons that have been colonized around Saturn or Jupiter, and so on and so forth. And the Expanse, really, the thing that really shines in it is that our problems that we have today are gone, yet they're completely present in the future, and I'll explain that as well. Mike says, I was going to ask which system this is based on. If you'd like to see Agent play, I suggest Titan's Grave and Tabletop. Also, Titan's Grave and Tabletop, also Will Wheaton, as that show has a two-part Agent episode. I forgot about that. Yes, Titan's Grave. Wayne, you're fine. You'll see what's going on. Mike says also gave seasons of the Expanse to watch and simply don't have the time. Yeah, it's 5 seasons. We'll get into it. And we a Will Wheaton, not a Will Wheaton apologist. I don't know. I'm out of the loop, so I wouldn't know what one thing is or the other. So on the cover of the Expanse, we basically have the three factions of political ideologies that really make up the Expanse um, setting and gaming world, as well as the television and the novels and things of that nature. And for on the left side, we have Earth and what represents Earth and the issues that Earth is going through. In the middle, we have represented the Belters, the people who live, work, and die in the asteroid belt. And then we have Mars on the very right and represents Mars. And in very, very general forms, uh, it very generalized Earth, like today, this basically is Earth advance forward. There's, the polar caps have melted. There's overpopulation. There aren't many jobs. Everyone's on the dole. There's a lottery system to even be educated to even move up. It's basically a giant sized, uh, hate to say this, but a giant sized ghetto. There are people who are doing well, but it's very difficult. And there isn't any money. Everybody has a different idea about how to improve the situation. And the infighting of how to improve it is just making things worse. In the center, we have the belt. And of course, like many things in our world, we have great ideas. Hey, there's great resources out there in the asteroid belt, and we're going to send people out there to retrieve those resources and bring them back to us. But we know when the workers start working and the money starts flowing in, very little resources go to the people who extract those resources. And that is a historical norm, right? The people who extract the resources don't get as much as the people who basically ordered and or paid to get those resources extracted. And the Belters became their own society. They wanted to have their own rules, their own regulations. They start having their own culture, and they want a voice. And both Earth and then the seceded governments of Mars are like, we sent you out there. You don't really have much of a choice. And the unfortunately, when you start, the further you get away from authority and the further you get away from oversight, terrible things can happen, and there's nobody there to bring you justice. So death and destruction is and murder, plain straight up murder, is a commonality, especially in the belt. And there are very few people to take action and justice on their behalf. So belters really don't like earthers because they've grown up in low gravity, zero gravity. They can't even, many of them have a physical difficulty even being in a gravity well, taking Earth's standard gravity. And the Belters want their due. And all of them, each of the factions does have a particular reason for feeling the way they do. And the setting doesn't make judgments on, for the most part, of who's good or bad, who's right or wrong. It's more or less like real life, based on time, based on situation, and based on what how we do in our real life, justification for actions. Not yet. Haven't gotten there yet, Deadman. Deadman says missed two factions: the pirates and the colonists. The pirates are that are ship based, and the colonists that venture through the gates. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We haven't gotten there yet. So this third faction is Mars, and Mars is basically Earth 2.0. And when I say that, I don't mean like oceans and blue skies per se, but basically Mars is the, we can do it better. And they have militarized themselves to the point of desperation. Most of the people don't realize it, including in the television show, one of the main characters, and in the books, one of the main characters, Bobby Draper, doesn't even realize that they've bankrupted themselves and pushed themselves to such a limit that Earth, Mars military engine only functions when there's a war to fight, and when there are no enemies left. And some people have seen the writing on the wall, and you start taking and taking from the population. Eventually, the austerity that they have in militarizing themselves gets to a breaking point, and the people are like, "All right, listen, I've been living on rations, and my kids been living on rations, and I've been, recycling and doing all this stuff for you guys. where's this blue Mars coming from? Where are we terraforming? Are we really building a new life? And then that comes to a breaking point as well. Um, Wayne says, I hear the Expanse is the most realistic space setting ever done. I just don't watch television, so I miss this stuff. It's not history, science, social information, or especially D&D related. Um, the When the television show started, they made a concerted effort to make things in it that are as realistic as possible. And there are real scientists who have, if you get on YouTube, search for it. There are real scientists who've watched episodes of the television show and talk about the physics that are involved. For example, uh, there's no artificial gravity in this world. And yes, dead man, I will get back to some of the other factions because there are other factions within these factions as well that complicate the whole issue. But the starships are built like office buildings, stacked. Yeah, yeah. Like Wayne says, much like U.S. economy functions well when we're selling arms or using them. Yeah, yeah. There. Unfortunately, it's a real thing, and Ty Frank and the other writer, and the creators of the show, during podcasts bring that fact up that a lot of the elements in this game and in the television series are about that. So the starships are built like office buildings, and they use something called an Epstein drive, unfortunate name, but they use an Epstein drive that is able to accelerate the ships under 1G so that they can have gravity. In the show, they do go into zero gravity. They have used magnetic boots, and the under 1G, you are pressed down to the floor, i.e., like standing in an office building, a tall, narrow tower. Halfway to their destination, the ships will flip over and do a burn to slow themselves down. Because if you're accelerating under 1G, you're under constant acceleration. Now you have to use the opposite to flip your ship over and back in towards where you're going. So if you leave Earth and you're going towards Mars, halfway to Mars, you go into zero G, mag your boots together, hit to the deck, ship flips over, and then you start decelerating at 1G. And that means when you see starships going towards planets, the engines are facing towards the atmospheres. And that's like one little bit that was done in the show. Uh, a handful of things that they bring in up in the show. For example, if you are bleeding or injured or you have internal injuries, it is intensely difficult for you to heal because humanity has grown up under gravity. And if blood pools and does not settle to one area, then it is extremely difficult to heal wounds when you have internal and external bleeding injuries because your blood will not coagulate. It'll just pool inside of you, as opposed to having the ability to drain it or have your body have it drain it, etc. There were images of people pouring drinks in spin gravity, and the drink was a few hand lengths away. The bottle was a few hand lengths away from the cup, and the fluid would pour down and then curve into the cup because yeah. Mm-mm-mm-mm. Oh, Z, thank you so much. Oh man, Dead Man lastly brings up other factions. So first of all, each of these factions, Earth, the Belt, Mars, has their own opinions, stereotypical opinions of all the other groups, the other two groups. Within those groups, there are other factions. So in Earth's faction, many of them are just like, listen, we're on our last. We're in survival mode. We are in prepper mode. Um, the belt's not going to help us. Mars wants to kill us. Politics is useless. Why don't we just prep ourselves for our coast being flooded, nuclear winter coming? Let's do that. Then there's other Earthers that are like, everybody everywhere all at once owes us everything. For the belters, there are belters who just say, you know what? We're just low class. We are considered low class, uneducated minors, and let's just bow our heads and hold our hat in our hand and just do whatever Mars and Earth tells us to do. While other belters are like, Hell no. We don't have an army. We don't have basic, even really an organized government. But what we do have are rocks, and we can throw rocks at people. And if we throw a rock at Earth and other places around the solar system, we've got a big weapon. Rocks are our version of the nuclear option, and we can start throwing rocks at people. Also, there's belters who are like, I'm out for myself. I'm just going to go be a pirate and scavenger and just steal from everybody else. I'm going to steal um, ice, which water and ice is extremely important. It's basically the new gold. We're going to steal that. We're going to steal gold and palladium and aluminum and things like that. And we're just going to go off on our own. And lastly, for Mars, there are Martians who are like Mars for Mars. There are Martians who think, you know what, maybe what we're doing isn't really right. We kind of need help here. There are others who are just like doubling down on the lies and such, and just keeping the population uneducated about what's really happening. And then there are even military factions of Mars that look at the writing on the wall and they just said, listen, everybody, don't say anything, but we're going to sell some weapons and then we're going to go off on our own. And lastly, there is an alien component to this. There's the debris of an ancient alien civilization left here in our own solar system with the protomolecule and the ring gates and using the rings gates to open up wormholes to other solar systems. It's pretty cool. Okay, so I'm going to let's see if we can adjust this. I'm going to show you guys as I talk more about the Expanse, um, to give you some more background. So in the thumbnail, I put the origins of the Expanse, which is kind of weird because the Expanse went from a setting for a video game to a bunch of novels. Okay, so right here we have the Expanse product line. Wait, am I sharing that with you guys? Oh, no, no, no. I'm sharing the books. Okay, so these are the novels. So the guys who wrote this basically wrote for a video game series that went defunct, and they decided, you know what, man, let's take our stuff and go somewhere else. So they vote for a video game, and the video game went defunct. And in their desperation and or boredom, they said, "Hey, all that stuff we wrote, why don't we just start playing? Um, why don't we just start playing role playing games? Right? We'll play the role playing games amongst ourselves." So they started playing the role playing games, and here's the role playing games from Green Ronin. And now this was their own version of tabletop. It hadn't existed yet, except amongst themselves. They made up characters and they start playing in this hard sci-fi setting in role playing game. And the name The Expanse came about. So then they said, well, you know what, we got to stop role playing. Maybe we should make a living about this. So they decided to turn the role playing games that they were playing into a novel series. They novelized their own role playing experiences. Those novelizations got awards. Those awards went out, and the books became so popular and had such a cult following that they went to or sci-fi went to them, and they went to sci-fi, sold the idea, and were adamant about adding as much realism and as much hard science fiction into the show. Um, one fallacy in portraying the television. I'm sorry, yeah, one fallacy about space and travel and television is that explosive decompression. Explosive decompression is not a real thing. If a hole is poked into a starship or the International Space Station, it won't explode. That's just not a thing. You can actually take like a notebook or a piece of metal or a thin piece of plastic and put it over a hole. You could plug it with your finger, really, and just plug the hole. As a matter of fact, even today, the International Space Station keeps leaking air. It's just a thing. It's just because of the differential in pressure. But in the show, there's also relativistic speeds of objects, and in I forget which episode, The characters are all in a room. They're locked in a room because they've been captured, and a piece of debris blasts through the ship. They don't show you the debris blasting through the ship because it was moving at probably hundreds of thousands of miles or kilometers an hour. But all it it blasted through the head of a person seated in a chair, and all you see is blood being sucked out of their body and pouring through a hole in the ship. And you could see one of the characters takes a look through the hole, and you could see all the decks it went through to get from one end of the ship throughout through the other end of the ship. And of course, it starts going to instant vacuum. There's barely any noise because the air is leaving, and there's zero gravity because they're in battle, right? So there's no artificial gravity. The ship's making maneuvers, and they start grabbing random things like notebooks and jackets and all that kind of stuff to plug the holes temporarily. And unfortunately, their friend, who probably lost about half the pints of blood in their body, spilled out into the space and then froze. Once the gravity came back, all the blood spilled down his body and fell on the floor. It's pretty nasty. All right, guys. Getting back to what our co-hosts have to say. Um, mm-mm. Zamar says also, I quite love the idea of writing out how each faction feels about the other, clearly spelling out the prominent feelings of a group you can play as towards the world helps with character. I agree with that, because we see in the show again the show really, except for our main characters, the show doesn't make an opinion as to who's right or wrong. It's actually a lot of people with a lot of stereotyping, right? And it's yeah, Mufa says, "Oh yeah, the railgun scene, classic." Yeah, there's a lot of stereotyping in the show, and a lot of people have. What happens is in real life, we don't know something. We trust other people telling us a thing. The problem with that is the source of the people telling us a thing, because a lot of times we like to have our feelings made manifest, not reality and facts made manifest. So if we hate another group, we portray that out there and have other people want to agree with us to hate that other group. And we are tribal, right? So we want to belong to the other tribe. And if you start raising your hand and going, why do we hate them again? Because I don't have those feelings. Oftentimes, if you're not part of the group, if you're not for us, you're against us. And I'll fold my arms and pout and poke out my bottom lip and go, well, why do you question my judgment about hating this other group? I don't think you're down with us. I think there's something wrong with you for even disagreeing with me, which is by the way, side note, is a good way to test the veracity of anybody you agree or disagree with. The the stronger the repercussions of disagreeing with someone, the greater chance I don't respect them. To the point that we have groups that if you don't agree with them, uh, they pretty much would want to kill you, which means that I definitely positively think everything they have to say means nothing. Zamar continues to say, uh, creation and world building, which is why I plan on adding to the human factions in my homebrew world. That man, classic Dungeons and Dragons really dropped the ball on making human beings extremely different. So the expanse, the reality of the expanse is that uh, resources are tight. Everybody knows it. Mars needs water from ice collected out in the asteroid belt and from comets. The Belters are doing that very thing. As a matter of fact, the living in space habitats is not necessarily a good thing. We see space habitats that are run down. People, children getting sick because the air cleaners aren't cleaned. Someone has to do it. You have population explosion, so there's only any space habitat has a limited amount of air, food, water, uh, living space, which is limited because the space is literally limited by what is constructed, and so you have those issues, and then you have Earth. The other two factions, Mars and the Belt, think Earth has everything, but Earth farmland is put to the brink. There's I'm sure they hint to it that farmers are few and far between, and even the farming industry themselves have started to weaponize themselves and try to fight a losing battle against governments who are trying to take more and more of their land to put more people on it. Because when you start heading into, you start going past double digit billions of people, and you start really learning towards getting towards the trillions, you need space for them to live, and you can build up, but you got to expand outwards, and you got to feed those people as well. And again, when you are extracting resources, are the people who have the the dying farmlands, are they being compensated for their troubles? And are they given a choice or even a voice in governments? And so that is a big thing as well. The the setting of the Expanse is sweet, and it is hard sci-fi. There's basically guns, bullets. There is some power armor, but essentially it's jumpsuits and slug throwers, and that's it. Mufa says, "Yeah, oh yeah, the railgun scene. The railgun scenes are awesome." Also, something else that they did is that there are inter uh, uh, solar system distances. So at one point, in order to fire your weapons at another ship, you have to predict where they're going to be first, because there's so much distance between two spacecraft firing at each other that it's not a point shoot instantaneous kill. It's point shoot, now we got to wait. And at one point, there were weaponry coming after a towards a Martian ship, and it took 20 minutes for them to realize that they were eventually going to die. That's They literally had time to say goodbye to each other. 20 minutes before torpedoes were going to hit them, and their point defense systems weren't going to be able to stop it, because they launched their own torpedoes to try to stop the incoming missiles, nuclear missiles, and it was just like, yeah, that's not going to happen. Lufa says, yeah, um, yep. Yeah, yeah. Mufus says, then they are trapped because they don't have spacesuits and the outside hallway is depressurized. Yeah, they were trapped in a room with no air on the outside of the room, air escaping inside that was escaping inside the room, and they had to find things to plug the holes and figure their way out of it. It was really just a really good scene. They did have advanced healing techniques. Basically, you sit in the chair, put your arm inside of like a computerized auto dock that would inject in you like healing strains and things. So we had characters with broken bones and severed limbs that were able to grow back after a while. But I think that was both cool technology and money saving, because you can't have it's very difficult to have your main actors running around without a limb and making it look good. So it's just easier just to have them regrow their limbs, but it did take time, so that's the thing. Wayne says the problem with humans gaining knowledge is we tend to believe facts, quote air quotes, about something the first time we encounter new information. It's extremely difficult to override it, um, or even want to. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. That learning process. Some call it. I've heard it called the astronaut problem. So the astronaut problem in science fiction and scientific circles is that if aliens were to meet us, they wouldn't meet us, they would meet astronauts. Astronauts technically aren't a very good description of what human beings are. Astronauts are well trained, they tend to be overly skilled, they tend to be psychologically tough, and they really aren't humanity. They're like humanity plus in some ways, and astronauts might have a political and or corporate and or factional authority and devotion to one type of process or another that might not agree with humanity. Like, for example, we could very easily send astronauts out into space to meet aliens, but those astronauts might go, "Hey guys, all right, let's talk together. Listen, we all come from different governments, but we all know that f them. We're going to deal with this on our own, right? There's nothing stopping really well trained, psychologically stable, and brilliant individuals to go, yeah, back Earth Central." They're pretty much idiots. Let's ensure that we make friends with aliens. But then when the aliens really come to Earth, they might just go like, "Whoa, these guys are horrible." Yeah, Zamar says, yeah, quote, if you don't agree with my faction, I won't accept you. End quote. That line of reasoning is why I became a nerd in the past and sit on the edge of the nerd factions today. Yeah. It used to, hey, nerd culture used to be the place where we would accept all the people thrown out of every other place. Now we've got people within our own faction that are like gatekeeping and kicking people out because of their opinions and things. It's like, really? Because this used to be our safe space. Yeah. Yeah, being truly open-minded is a problem for our brains. We are not set that way by default. For logical reasons, we need to keep ourselves safe. The minute we see a predator kill something, it locks in our brains predator bad, life good, escape predator, right? We're not interested in making friends with the predator until somebody went, you know that pack of wolves over there? If we feed them and they don't come after us, maybe we could befriend them. Which is kind of, it's like backwards that we even domesticated like cats and dogs, but we did. So yeah. Mike says space combat simulates submarine combat. It sure did. A sealed vessel in a hostile environment where weapons require timing and calculations to succeed. Yes, in the television show, it when battle started, they knew they had to use their mag boots to stay as safe as possible, stow away all loose items because those loose items become basically internal um, high velocity kill objects, and they all got in their spacesuits because they knew that at any moment, guess what? Something could punch through the ship, air could start bleeding out, and it could be a vacuum inside. It's like Wayne's like, oh, back at Earth Central, they're all idiots. This show really does go for realism. Yeah. Okay, so um, going further deeper into the world building of the Expanse, as as the show goes on, there are redemption arcs. There are people who learn from their mistakes. In some ways, there are good guys, and then there are people doing terrible things for good reasons. One of the greatest characters, uh, Sarala, and I'm going to find her name because I'm going to butcher it, and I apologize for butchering the actress's name because her voice is sweet. Let's see if I can find. I'm going to. Okay, here we go. All right, let's share this tab instead, and let's bring this up here. And oh, I can't zoom in on it. Okay. Uh, her name is. I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of this. Shorey Agdashlu is an Iranian and American actress. Following numerous starring roles on the stage, she made her film debut in Chess of the Wild. Her next two films, The Report and Sote Delan, garnered critical acclaim and established Agdalashu. She plays Christian Avasar- Avasarala, and it's actually been pronounced different ways even on the show. I heard those actors. Anyway, she plays a politician, and her deep ass smoky voice is so sweet. It's there's something about it. Like she's got a thick accent, but it pulls something inside of me. But anyway, in the very beginning of her show, because she's such a brilliant, she's her introduction as a brilliant um, a politician actually starts out pretty intense because she's shown torturing a belter. And how she is torturing a belter is they captured a belter, and in rendition, the government captured this belter, put this belter in a black site, and the belter, living in low gravity, is being tortured under Earth gravity. And she's talking to the belter, and the belter is like 6.5 to 7 feet tall, and she's threatening the belter. And if you don't tell me, I can, a thing, then I can put you in a tank to alleviate the pressure. But you're not going to tell me. And it's pretty nasty, but it's awesome. It's awesome. That introduction for her is awesome because it shows that um, she really is an individual that not to be trifled with. She also is a liar, a very good one, And as you see in the show, like there's another character named Fred Johnson, who was a space marine and was told to placate an uprising on a space habitat. Little did they let him know that basically not only did they give up, they didn't have any weapons. They basically put their weapons down. They're like, hey, we've got women and children. And what happened? The government blocked the radio signals from Fred Johnson's Space Marines, and the Space Marines went in and used weapons and slaughtered everybody. And there's an image of Fred Johnson watching all the bodies floating in space, and there's just bits and pieces of dead women and children and innocents. And he defects. You've got this experienced Space Marine that up and defects, and what happens? They're like, he's a traitor. He rebelled against us. He's now working with the Belters. He's a terrorist. And Fred Johnson, as lethal as he is, called the Butcher. He's a great character that's introduced, and it's awesome. So there's a number of characters. One character they actually rewrote for the television show. What is her name? Her name is what she was brought about in the end of the first season. I can't remember her name. Um, Rimmer. Not Rimmer. Oh gosh, I can't. Sorry, you guys know it. But long story short, um, the Expanse is a great template for creating the interactions between at least three or more parties. Like I said, remember, I told you guys before, three is like the lowest number that really makes something interesting because it's very difficult to have a quorum. It's very difficult to have a stalemate when you have three odd numbers of parties, especially three of them. And in the Expanse, especially if you're playing in this role playing game, the players have to balance uh, tradition, loyalty, and their own motivations. Essentially, how the Expanse works is very much like how World of Darkness works with the vampire clans. It's like if you're not our friend, you're our enemy, and that becomes a very sticking point. And of course, our main characters are a melting pot of all of the factions. Bobby Draper, who's a power armored badass chick from Space Marine, chick from Mars. She's just like they're all gonna die. She's hardcore, and eventually she realizes that her own government is playing tricks, and she doesn't defect. Instead, she holds tight to what Mars is supposed to be, not what Mars is currently. And she ends up becoming an ally of Avasarala, who's from Earth, and she ends up realizing that the Belters and even some of the Martians have a point where she used to be a hardliner, and she's like, wait a minute, there's a lot of lies and things being told. And of course, much like resource acquisition and management, they throw in an alien resource, a protomolecule, and everyone wants to acquire this protomolecule. Some want to acquire the protomolecule because it can change human DNA so that humans could live in, air quotes, the void of space and not need many resources that everyone is scrambling for. How awesome would it be if humans were genetically modified to live in vacuum, to live off of background radiation, to be able to consume the small bacterium or to consume small minerals and things left in uh, moons and places around the solar system. Also, what I love about the Expanse, and this is what I love about post-humanism and transhumanism, is that it's not literally Venus, Mars, um, Jupiter, things like that. You also have, like in the belt, you can absolutely Google this. There are plenty. The asteroid belt isn't as it's not like science fiction where you have all the rocks all close together, but there are asteroids out there that are as large as small moons. So you have Ceres, you had a station called Eros, you had a large starship called the Canterbury. You had and each of them had their own um, internal cultures and allegiances. When you have a place like Eros, which was on the downfall, and people, just scraping by, hoping to leave the space station. You have a place like Ceres, which is semi loyal to an Earth corporation and still getting minerals and even ice and bringing it back, and the Belters both under the thumb of the corporations, the corporate police, yet needing to work for them. Mike says, yeah, 3 and 5 are great numbers for rival factions. You need a minimum of those for intrigue and proper tension. Yeah, if you just have two, if you go with even numbers, one of the problems is that means you're either designing in perfect equilibrium between two opposing ideas, or one is superior to the other and there's nothing the other can do. Whereas if you have an odd number like 3, and during the show's airing, each one of these groups was in downfall and acquired the help of the other group to raise themselves up. If I made that clear. So yeah, it was pretty good. For those who aren't into science fiction per se, like more fantasy, I'm going to point at you, Dub B, just because you're here and you're a great person. For those who aren't into really the science fiction, The Expanse is pretty, dare I say, expansive. There are a large number of novels. There's how many? Let me go back to the television series. I'm just going to read this off here. I think there were 6 seasons, and there are supposedly there's they want to do continue the story with some animation. So there are 6 seasons of aired things. So it's long. It's a game. Some would say it's the science fiction version of Game of Thrones. I wouldn't disagree with that assessment. Um, but it does follow our protagonists pretty tightly. Except at one point when they start to separate, and it's pretty cool. Um, but I will say that instead of like magic and monsters and things, really the magic of it is the science, the technology that's being used in it, how they use that science. There's some pretty interesting things that happen with low gravity, zero gravity, which the creators of the show, thank goodness they did this. um, the creators of the show put their foot down, and they were like, we are not doing this show unless we can accurately portray low gravity and zero gravity. And that's a huge difficulty when it comes to, you know the logistics of it, when portraying anything on television or movies, let alone a TV show, which tends to have a lower budget. The main characters themselves had to go through training so that they could act based on the scene they were in, whether they were in light gravity, zero gravity, standard gravity, and use the use of the boots. Um, there's some pretty important elements that happen with the use of the boots. For example, when they're using the boots, they're walking around on magnetic floors. And yes, it looks like they're in gravity, but their only reason they're on the floor is because of magnetics. So if that's ever loose, they start to float away. There's a pretty dangerous scene where somebody who gets on the ship, the Rocinante, which was a salvaged and stolen slash stolen Martian battle cruiser that they recommissioned and called it the Rocinante. They basically stole it. The well, at least the crew wasn't on it any longer. They didn't give it back. So uh, anyway, on the ship, they end up getting a crew member that's not used to being on a starship, and he doesn't put the tools away. And during some battle maneuvers, a wrench or two starts bebopping around the starship when they start making maneuvers, because the wrench is going to keep moving. What is it? What's the scientific form? An object in motion stays in motion unless acted upon, and an object at rest stays at rest unless acted upon. So a wrench moving forward when the ship makes a maneuver will keep going forward, which could basically go through you into the bulkhead. So there was a pretty interesting scene about that, as well as the fact that we have one of the main characters in the show who ends up suffering a stroke, getting a brain hemorrhage, and dies because of the acceleration. They end up being on a ship called the Razorback, which was a rich person's private starship, basically the equivalent of a space supercar. And the ship can accelerate so fast that it can. The ship's acceleration is harder than the human body could accept, and so during acceleration, it pops a blood vessel in his brain and he dies. That's yep, Newton's third law. Yeah, Newton's third law. An object in motion stays in motion, and an object at rest stays in rest unless acted upon. Z says, if I get what I want, I will be taking Stephen Baxter's Zeely saga and turning it into a setting for my game system. Once the bare bones is ready for sale, of course, I will have to talk with the man. not that I not that I feel horrible about that. Okay, all right. Oh, by the way, Newton's I love myself a fig Newton myself. Yeah. Oh man. Absolutely. Yep. It's about inertia. Now, what are some other aspects? Oh. Sorry, I almost forgot this. Talking about the characters in the redemption arc, th- there's a character, one of the fan favorite characters in the show that is his the character's name is Amos. Let me see if I can find the actual let's see if I can find the actual actor's name. No, Wes Chatham. That's it. John Wesley Chatham. Uh, Chatham and Ty Frank have a podcast called Ty and That Guy, and they talk about the show. They talk about the Expanse and kind of analyze the Expanse. They actually went back and began the podcast by going over every single episode, and now they just have a general podcast. But anyway, um, uh, J. Dub Chatham plays a character named Amos. And actually, let me move this up a little bit. There we go. So, yeah, share this tab. There we go. Chatham. It should be airing now. So, come on. So, in the show, Amos, he okay. You think he plays a thug? He's got muscles. He's basically a gun runner, right? He's just a big burly guy in a dirty jumpsuit who likes carrying around heavy weapons and hurting people. And you find out that he's basically his lifestyle has turned him into a sociopath. Um, and he knows he's a sociopath. And one of the great things about his character is you think he's one dimensional. He's a thug and he likes to hurt people. But you find out that his loyalty to individuals is out of a desire. He knows he's missing something inside of himself. And he was a child. He was raised as a child prostitute. He was sold on the streets and by his mom in the streets of Earth. And even being sold in as a child prostitute by and it wasn't his biological mom, it's just a lady that picked him up off the streets to try to raise him. Um, e- Even her efforts were considered admirable in the life in which he lived, something called the churn. It's a slang term for like basically living, surviving, and dying in this dying earth in the urban landscape, hellscape, basically that he lived in. And in the show, you follow this basically, he's a sociopath. Like he literally has zero interest. He has no empathy, but his desire is that he uses other individuals as a proxy for empathy, and he attaches himself to individuals who have empathy. And there is a great scene where he attaches himself to a yeah, talk about are you talking about Thomas Jane? Yes, Yes, yes. Yeah, talking about, yeah, I knew you were gonna get to Amos. Okay, but yes, Amos is to Expanse as Jane is to Firefly. Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's an excellent scene. I know there's a clip of it on you can easily find it on YouTube. There's a scene where Amos attaches himself to this essentially a passive, non-combatant, non-violent scientist who just wants to grow food for people. And I believe it was on Europa or Io. It was on the moon. It was on a moon around either Saturn or Jupiter. And Amos looks at this guy, and he's just like, first he just looks at him like you're a mark, dude. Like if you don't learn how to pick up a weapon and toughen your ass up, you're gonna get killed. And the guy's just like, sure, but then what will I be? And Amos attaches himself to this dude. And at one point, this guy wants to have because his daughter is captured and kidnapped. And there's nothing worse than having your child harmed and under threat. And this this basically hydroponics guy wants to take revenge. And Amos looks at him and says, "Put the gun down, man. You don't have to do this. You're better than that. You should keep yourself pure. There's no reason for you to pick up a weapon." The person that's being threatened is like does the prototypical like wipe the sweat off their brow by the back of their hand and goes, "Whoo, I thought I was going to die." Amos walks the scientist to the door, closes the door, and he's like, "Hey, guess what? He's out of here. I'm not him. I don't have any regards, and we're gonna get medieval on your ass." And Amos just it's a pretty amazing scene because Amos takes revenge on this dude. Of course, they don't show it to you, but your imagination is like, yeah, he gonna go to work on this guy. Um, when he says, "I'll have to maybe watch the show, perhaps after my third run through Fringe." I loved Fringe. It went off there were elements of it that kind of went off the rails a little bit, but I love the characters. The characters to me were the best in Fringe. But yeah, I would suggest watching it. Here, I will say to you and to everybody out there who loves this show, like myself, um, I don't have my head in the sand, and there are elements of the show that are intellectually and psychologically captivating that when watching it isn't very interesting. It's a very cerebral show. Let's put it that way. And even in the first episode, because when when the video game turned into a homebrew setting to play, which turned into novels and novellas, which then turned into a sci-fi television show, which then got dropped and then picked up by another television series, Amazon, which then got picked up and turned into a real tabletop RPG by Green Ronin, which may then turn into an animated show. Um, um, it there are elements of the show where you like you start scratching your head and you're like, this show is amazing, but I think they could have made this a little bit more interesting because it's very gray and dark and somber. Um, so I will say people who've tuned out of the show, I get it. I do get it. Um, like I said, it's very much more psychologically and intellectually exciting when you hear about the fact. Like, let me go back to the Martian ship about to die after 20 minutes. That's not very interesting. Like normally we see space battles and they're going to shoot a laser and blah blah blah. No, they shoot nukes at each other. They shoot torpedoes. They have point defense systems that are basically like 50 cal guns to blast things shot at each other. Heck, even the actor that portrays the pilot of the Rocinante mentioned in a show before he got on the show, he's like, "Hey, you know what?" He was practicing like, "I'm going to have how to act piloting a ship. I'm going to have like hand gestures and I'm going to like lean to the left and lean to the right and make this exciting." And he come to find out that it's much like using a video game controller. And he said in real life it's like using a video game controller. You basically move things with your thumbs. Air jet fighter pilots don't have giant joysticks between their legs like we think they do. It's very slight moves to the left and right, very tiny maneuvers to get big results. And he's like, well, how am I going to make this interesting? And even the people in the show were like, yeah, how are we going to make this interesting? Right. But when they stuck to their guns, they really did a way. There was a way for them to build tension into how the show operates. Like, for example, um, you're like, for example, they built tension into the fact that when you're strapped into your chair, that's being strapped in your chair is safe. Not being strapped in your chair in zero G is unsafe. So when the ship starts doing maneuvers and you see one of the actors getting thrown around the ship, you're like, man, this show does not hesitate to want to put a bullet uh, th- thematically into the back of the heads of one of their characters and just kill them off. So this character, I might be actually watching the last thing I see of this character. Um, Deadman says the only bad part of the Expanse was the listing of all the unresolved plot hooks at the end of the final episode. Dude, whoa! I that's the Expanse is an example of the problem with the business side of television versus the artistic side of television, and that is every right now every single television show is canceled. You past, present, future, every single episode, everything that we see on television today, yesterday, and tomorrow, and years in the future is canceled. So, what I mean by that is everything has to come to an end. The problem is there are people working on those shows and they want a paycheck. So, if the show isn't successful and the people on the show will automatically start signing deals so they can go to other shows so they can start getting another job, which is why towards the end of television shows the best writers, the best actors, the best cinematographers begin leaving and the show starts to dwindle off into nonsense. Very few shows end on a high note, and because everyone wants a job and they go, you know what, we got 5 episodes left and I know it's going to end, I'm out of here. Right. The other problem with ending on a high note is, guess what? If your show is popular, why would you end your show? Now, you could say, well, I wrote the scripts and the script says we're supposed to end after 3 seasons. But if the third season ends on its highest regarded watched episodes at all, then the people who gave you the money, remember the money makers control the show, not the creators, say, we want 2 more episodes. Well, and you've already tied up all your plot holes, your plot threads, sorry, then and filled your potholes and tied knots in your plot ends and plot threads, then that means you have to unravel what you just did to continue the show for 2 more seasons until they again cancel your show as the viewership trails off and starts to die off. So that's the problem. Yeah, it's crazy. And The Expanse kind of did that. It ended well, but man, they left it open to basically tell everybody, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Hey, if you love the show, please petition them. Please tell them we want the show to go on further and further and further. So they left a lot of plot threads open on the off chance, maybe sort of kind of John Bezos, who loves the show, might kind of sort of continue the show. And it didn't happen. So, yeah, we were looking up in the stars, like the actors who were on the end of that set, looking up in the stars and going, man, I wonder what if, maybe if, and it didn't happen. Mm-mm-mm-mm-mm. Flying an airship is like driving a car at 30K per hour with no wind friction. Yeah, I not that it matters. I went up in a hot air balloon, and I have a particular fear of heights. My wife went to go up in a hot air balloon, but it was one of her bucket list things, so I sucked it up because that's what you do. You suck that shit up. It was awesome though. But the funny thing was, as we were the gentleman that was the aeronaut that was piloting the hot air balloon was saying that you don't feel the wind because a hot air balloon moves at the same speed as the wind. So a hot air balloon moving, no matter how fast the wind is, depending on your the eight the elevation you are at, you will move at the same speed as the air, so you don't feel anything when you're in a hot air balloon. Yep. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Z. Yep, yep, yep. You got some bikes like I'm driven faster than that. Zamara said that is where you have to say, "Suck my avocados," and tell them that you can work on anthologies, but not the main story. See, and why do you guys have to have such a very simple, very common sense is not common and doesn't make sense there, Z. They could have very easily continued the show much like Game of Thrones could have done this as well, right? You, well, how about we do small anthologies, one episode or like 1 to 3 episode arcs, pay for that, put that out there, see how popular it is, and then maybe move on to other characters and do that. Keep the sets, keep the costumes, keep the people who are, keep them on the rolls and go, listen, here we have another project that's short. We want you to do the hair and the makeup. We want you to go back and get the props for this thing. Hey, please don't tear down our sets. We're going to use those sets over again. The Rocinante set, which is the inside of the ship, the digital assets for the outside of the digital battles and things like that. Keep all that stuff around. Don't throw it away and waste it and have to start from scratch all over again. Ah, wow. And the books are written, the Expanse books were written in novels and novellas, short stories. You could follow one or more characters. And as a matter of fact, when the show aired on Amazon, they did these little 5 to 10 minute interludes with interactions between some of the main characters. There's a pretty funny one with Amos, our muscular gun toting sociopath criminal, and Bobby Draper, our female hard ass combat trained space marine, and the two of them kind of like physically testing each other and going at it because like it's a very testosterone filled kind of thing that you do. And Bobby, as as cute and sexy as she is, she's all testosterone, man. And it's like the two of them going at it, doing these little like tests of like endurance and stuff is pretty funny. It's like 5 or 10 minutes or something, little interludes, but they could do half-hour interludes for different characters and stuff. Yeah, and I think you could do that with a lot of intellectual properties that are out there. Wayne says, got to mention my favorite science fiction space opera, Babylon 5, amazing 5-year story. Yes, of I don't know how they got away with it. Babylon 5, and I haven't seen it in such a long time. It deserves a revisit. Babylon 5 had a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it's very difficult to convince bean counters and people making money off of a show due to viewership, subscription services, advertisement, selling of subsidiary products like t-shirts and action figures and posters to tell them, hey, by the way, we're going to turn the spigot off. I know you're making a lot of money right now, but we're going to turn the spigot off. Although I gotta say, absence makes the heart grow fonder. You could turn the show off and go, end it and say, we'll be back soon, but not immediately, right? We'll be back, in months or years or something, and just make people grow fond. So, anyway, this is just an overview of the Expanse, and not necessarily the role playing game. I didn't go over the details of the role playing game, but the Expanse setting and kind of what we can learn from it. Um, the idea that like I did hear about their talk of remaking of. I thought it was the article that I read was like they weren't sure whether it was going to be remade or rebooted or whether they were going to kind of like do a weird continuation of it or something. Oh, Mufa says B5 was supposedly actually being rebooted, but whatever network that was got sold recently, so I think it's canned again. Yeah, development hell. That happens a lot when you hear about development. It just you need money. You need money. You need producers to make this stuff. Zamar says, here's another reason why you make anthologies when you can't or won't make the main story. Easy spin-off testing, absolutely. Spin-off testing for great actors, great storytelling. But maybe you find out your spin-off details a part of storytelling you didn't think people wanted to know about. But yeah, anyway, he goes on to say what story will be popular to explore, what won't, right? What to push, what not to push. Exactly. Like, for example, maybe there are interactions between two of the actors that for some reason you didn't think was going to be good, but everybody go like Amos. Amos is a character that's hugely popular. Why a sociopathic, hard ass, gun tooting, muscular person who um, they had they had issues writing Amos because they didn't want to make Amos angry, and they didn't want to make Amos. They wanted to make Amos intimidating because he is essentially a sociopath through circumstance, but they didn't want to make him stereotypically angry in the background. So he has a habit of saying things in the show, and there are some one-liners that they give this actor where he only says what's necessary and he means what he says. He doesn't really lie about anything, and it's crazy where he starts having interactions with people. Anyway, it's like, let's jump on Zoom and make DBJ run an Expanse game just for us just to be evil. Yeah, hells yeah. Yeah, but like, who would have known that that character would be what they were if it wasn't for the fact of them taking a chance and going, yeah, television never saw this kind of character before. Let's write that character in and whatnot. So, yeah. But anyway, guys, thank you very much for being part of the show on this Friday. He's like, I'll take a day off to play. Look, let's not threaten the bean counters in our lives, Although I sure would love it. I almost can't wait. Okay, so we're at the end here. So I almost can't wait for I have 5 years before I can retire. And I almost can't wait because I'm not going to work at Walmart and be a greeter. I'm going to do this and make this my air quotes full-time job, or maybe not full-time job. It will be the way that I will supplement my retirement until Social Security, if it's still there, I can pick that up as well. Yeah, so can't wait. I can't wait another minute. I really can't. uh, I really, if I could, if only I could just, make this a full time job, I would. And I would just be like, hey, I'm running a game 2 o'clock in the morning. Hey, everybody overseas, join on in, or whatever. Or actually, no, it would probably be middle afternoon here, evening overseas, whatever the case might be. I would love it. I can't wait to do it. I can't wait. Yeah, it's very difficult to do. Lastly, before we get out of here, so um I wait, so thank you, DBJ, and all your intelligent, unlike me, co-hosts co-host for a beautiful hour. Love being here with all of you. Hey, thanks for being okay. Thanks for being open-minded because, admittedly, you're like, you know, this thing isn't for me, that thing isn't for me. But the fact that you take action and go, let me see what they have to say about this thing is really cool. And I think many people on the interwebs could learn from your desire to just be like, hey, I'll take part in this just to see what it's about. And if I don't like it, I'll tune out. If I like it, I'll tune back in and see what's going on. And I think we we as a society deserve more people like that. And especially like you guys who are, Samara, who's I'll say is a patently commonsensical, Mike who's always brain churning, all that kind, all you guys out there, Mufa, who's always like dropping bombs. It's like, yeah, yeah, we need people like you guys because, like, yeah, and even being opinionated and being opinionated open-mindedly, like, hey, here's my opinion. What do you guys think? And we could agree or disagree, but we just agree or disagree, basically. Yeah. Humility, that shit ain't humility. Shit, if you could bottle that and sell it as like a, I don't know, the new drug du jour, that would be awesome. Cause Everybody is, not only believes that they're right, but they also want to surround themselves with other people who think they're right, and anybody who thinks they're wrong can go kick rocks. Lastly, I will say that I created a 2-page RPG. I used it from it's powered by what am I going to say? It's powered by um, Push RPG. That is a open license game, and created my first. It's called Dreamfire, and created my first RPG. Now the problem with making this was that it needed a lot of details. I had to get some help in the Discord, and there's some details you'll see in the Discord. I think it's at version. Oh, it's up to version 1.2 now. Up, I forgot to update it. But anyway, I created my own. I decided to create my own. Yeah, shit. God damn it. Decided to create my own RPG, and it's an RPG about uh, dream being a dream walker, going into a dream world and helping people or surviving in or stopping adversaries that are affecting the dreams of people in the real world. And it's called Dreamfire. And I decided to call this these little mini games, these little micro games, design build juxt. I'll give it out to you guys. There's still some details I gotta like figure out in it because I had some people in the Discord like taking a look at it. Druden looked at it. Deadman kind of looked at it. I had to. The hard part is like if you take a look over here, like the word, it's like gotta cut the word count down to like at least half. It's pretty packed in there. But yeah, made my own. So you basically play a dream warrior, and you go out there and go into other people's dreams. Sometimes you bring your own problems with you into the dreams. So I kind of wanted some people who have neurological divergence to kind of take a look at it to see like I don't mention any specific like I don't mention depression or sociopathy or like manic depression or anything, but I kind of framed it in a fantasy realm, and I think I generalized it enough to not be super recognizable. So that is what I did. Mike says, I'll play anything so long as the person running it has a passion for it and makes the players feel passion. I role playing games saved my life, literally. And giving me a place to visit without delving into the dangerous places that I lived in real life. So, yeah. Yeah, I don't believe I'm right. I know I'm right. Usually by mistake, but I don't let myself know the horrible truth. Yeah. Ain't that a mantra? Ain't that a mantra for life? So and anyway, the reason for me making the role-playing game other than making one and kind of giving it out and seeing what I could do with a simple system and kind of using simple systems and then grow from there. The other reason for doing it was to set myself up for failure so other people can kind of see the way that I do a thing. So let me see if I could share this and let people view it without being able to edit it. Um let's see if view only link. I'm going to copy that and then I'm going to put it into the chat and then other people who come by can take a look at it. Maybe I'll paste it here. It's difficult for me to jump into the Discord when I can, but I'll upload different versions of it. Wayne says, I'm autistic. If that helps, depression almost killed me. 4 years of cognitive behavioral therapy fixed it. Ooh, I'm not going to put that comment out. Shit, I shouldn't have even read that out loud. But yeah. If you could take a look at it, I would love it because I wanted to make a game where you literally are a person who goes into other people's minds as a dreamscape or nightmarescape to help them with their issues. But anyway, that's the idea. I don't want to say too much. Um, Even under sleep experiences, you can play someone that's like, no, no, here we go. Sorry, not sleep experiences. You're unawakened transitioning. How do you translate from our world, the awakened world, to the sleeping world? And you could be like a dedicated meditation practitioner, someone who meditates. You could be an unfortunate coma patient. You could be a traumatized escapist. You could be a hired industrial dream pilot, maybe a daydreaming savant, or a street pharma supplicant. Um, so yeah, I traumatized escapist is kind of the closest thing I could get to someone who was affected by traumatic events, who now escapes our world by going into, deep into their own mind. And a daydreaming savant is kind of the other way of saying like you were just born that way. And then a street farmer supplicant is kind of, it's like you're using either like pharmaceuticals or street drugs or something, and you're beholden to them without calling you a drug addict, if that makes sense. Um, but yeah. So anyway, thank you very much for being part of the show. Thank you very much for doing this. And I think this is. I wanted to see how fast and how easily and how manipulative I could use like different types of these rules light systems that are available in the SRD, and modify them and go like, man, I bet we could put a bunch of these together and see what the hive mind comes out with. So that's it. All right, Z, have a great one. Everybody have a great day. I know it's going late. Throwing up some throwing up somewhere and just put a throwing up somewhere and just put a link to it. Huh? You could drop it in the Discord. I have Discord on my phone. It's hard for me to like go back and forth in it unless I set it up before I leave. I was able to set it up yesterday. I think I'll try to set it up again today. So anyway, guys, have a great one. Thank you very much for being part of the show. Thank you very much for tolerating me and my bullshit. Uh, thank you again. Have a great one. I will see thee later. Check out the Expanse. You'll love it. Bye.